I'm Sydney, and today I'm going to be talking about 1982's Poltergeist.
They're here!
This movie was starring Craig T. Nelson, Jo Beth Williams, and Heather O'Rourke. This movie was directed by Tobe Hooper and it was produced by Steven Spielberg. If you haven't seen this movie yet, it's not super widely streamable, I noticed. It's available on Prime Video and then you can rent it on YouTube as well. I am super lucky by my house. I still have a video rental store.
Have you seen this?
So I was able to just rent it from there, which was cool. Today, instead of talking about the plot of the movie, I'm going to be discussing the infamous curse that is associated with this film.
It's a blessing and a curse!
So today I'm going to go ahead and break down the 3 main reasons why people think this curse exists.
The limit does not exist.
Let's break some stuff down. First off, we have Dominique Dunne, who portrayed the eldest sister, Dana Freeling, in the movie. In 1982, Dominique had recently ended a really rough relationship with her boyfriend, John Sweeney. Throughout their relationship, he was just really abusive. It's recorded of him choking her multiple times and beating her and her having to run away to her mom's house. It was just a really bad situation. They had been living together, and on the night of October 30th, John shows up to their former house that Dominique is still living in. He shows up and he's just begging her to take him back, essentially. Somewhere the conversation turned really violent outside of the home, and John ended up choking Dominique from, there's different sources online, but somewhere between like 4 minutes. Dominique ended up dying 4 days later on November 4th, 1982, just 5 months after Poltergeist was released. John Sweeney was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and he was sentenced a year later. He was released though in 1986 after only serving 3 years and 8 months of a 6.5-year sentence, which alone 6.5 years is just like infuriating to me. After doing some research into this trial, it was super botched. Judge Burton Katz, who was assigned to the trial, he refused to allow the testimony of Dunne's mother, who had personally experienced and witnessed his rage on multiple occasions. But more importantly, one of Sweeney's ex-girlfriends came and testified, explaining her 3-year relationship with him and that it was extremely abusive. At one point, she suffered a collapsed lung, a broken nose, and a perforated eardrum because of his abuse. Judge Katz, though, made none of this testimony accessible to the jury. Everything about this is just extremely upsetting and tragic. It's just crazy because now he's just out there free. He served, whatever I said, less than 4 years for murdering someone with his bare hands. Clearly, this is just so wrong because you could claim, oh, it was an accident, you know, but if you're choking someone for up to 4 minutes, you have enough time to process that what you're doing is wrong, you know? Okay, I could go on and on talking about how, like, upsetting this is to me, so. Okay, next we have Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann in the film. There really is just something that's so just like precious and sweet and magnetic about Heather O'Rourke. After Poltergeist was released, she became a regular on several TV shows as a guest star. She was on Chips and she was a regular on Happy Days.
Oh, sure.
Don't worry, Joni. If things don't work out, I'll be your best friend.
And after Poltergeist, she went on to star in Poltergeist 2 and Poltergeist 3. Early 1987, she became ill, which was at the time thought to be, I'm gonna totally botch how you say this,
Giardiasis.
We'll go with that, which was later diagnosed as Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory bowel disease. Because of this diagnosis, she was put on steroids to treat the Crohn's disease, to treat the inflammation. This was also during the time of the filming of Poltergeist 3, so if you notice in the film, she's quite puffy. She just looks a little bit different. She looks off. I remember seeing these movies as a kid growing up, and even then not knowing about the illnesses or anything like that. I just remember thinking, wow, like she doesn't look right. It's true, because she doesn't look like fat, she just looks puffy, she looks swollen. On January 31st, 1988, she woke up really ill and was vomiting. And then even worse, the next morning she woke up and her fingers were blue and she collapsed, and so an ambulance was called. On the way to the hospital, she suffered cardiac arrest. She passed away later that day after a surgery to repair an acute bowel obstruction. This was actually caused by congenital, meaning that she's had this condition since birth, stenosis of the intestine, and it was complicated by septic shock. Because this was congenital, this meant that the doctors had completely been misdiagnosing her entire life. Because of the wrong treatment she had been given, it ended up costing her her life.
My Christmas wish is to wish everybody on Earth a very Merry Christmas and a very safe Christmas.
Important wish.
The world was just in complete shock when this happened.
She was beautiful. She wanted so badly to be a good actress. She was a healthy, happy, normal girl. It couldn't have been more surprising to us. It makes no sense.
Kathleen O'Rourke, Heather's mom, ended up filing a lawsuit against Kaiser for the misdiagnosis.
The mother of the star of the 3 Poltergeist movies has filed a wrongful death suit against the hospital and medical group that treated Heather.
They all say, okay, this is what she has, so you accept it. And then when something goes wrong, it's hard to believe that they could have made a mistake.
What they thought she had was a bowel inflammation. What she actually had was an obstruction. And the difference is they were treating her medically with drugs, whereas in fact what they should have done almost a year before her death was to operate and remove this narrowed portion of the bowel. And that's a fairly routine procedure, and had that been done.
The case ended up going into arbitration, meaning that they ended up settling it out of court. But yeah, I just hope that the mom, like, nothing can replace obviously your daughter's life, but I hope that she was able to be compensated in a way that would be helpful for her mind and her soul. The whole thing really, like, even thinking about it makes me want to cry. Like, it's just really, really tragic that her life was cut so short. She was only 12 years old when she ended up passing away. And what makes it so much worse on the internet, because the internet is just so cruel sometimes, obviously, is that there's a lot of conspiracies surrounding her death. Some of these conspiracies involve secret underground Hollywood pedophile rings, and some people are even blaming Steven Spielberg for her murder, that she was murdered. I personally think it's just easier for some people to process horrible information by placing the blame on someone else. Lastly, what ties all of these things together to create a curse is the bodies. In the film Poltergeist, there is a scene where JoBeth Williams, who plays the mother, who absolutely freaking crushes that role and is amazing.
I can smell her.
There is a scene where she falls into their swimming pool that is under construction and she is consumed by corpses and skeletons. Well, it turns out that those skeletons were freaking real.
What is real?
According to JoBeth Williams herself, in my naivete, I assumed these were not real skeletons. I assumed that they were prop skeletons, you know, made out of plastic or rubber or something, but the skeletons were not synthetic. I found out from the crew that they were using real skeletons because it's far too expensive to make skeletons out of rubber and stuff. And I think everybody got creeped out by the idea of that. Like, you think? You think? Bruce Casein, who worked as the assistant prop master on Poltergeist, confirmed this claim, stating, "Yes, the skeletons were real. They came from Carolina Biological. Replica skeletons did not exist as far as I remember at the time. They're now common and relatively cheap, and the rush to the bottom line for cost will dictate." He says, "As for the curse, this filming wasn't any different than any other production I was a part of."
Alrighty then.
So knowing this, I do understand why people think there's a curse, but honestly, it wasn't that uncommon in the 70s and even in the 80s for prop people to be using real skeletons. I mean, look at movies like Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead used real corpses. But again, kind of like earlier, I think that when really horrific things happen that can be connected, it's a lot easier for our hearts and our minds if we're able to place a blame to them. But really, it's just a really horrible, violent ex-boyfriend and a misdiagnosis.
Since I do not call this a jinx, so I think that it's pretty much a courtesy to put to an end this superstitious crap.
There were a few more minor things that happened that people contribute to the curse. The other thing was the clown mechanical failure. There's a scene in the film where a clown doll attempts to choke Robbie, who's played by Oliver Robbins. During filming, the clown actually began to choke Oliver, and Steven Spielberg had to go in and intervene and get it off of him. Robbins was interviewed by Icons of Fright saying, "The contraption caught around my neck. Steven saw that probably in the video assist deck, and he pulled me away from it. Who knows what might have happened otherwise. It was very fast. Maybe I wouldn't be here today." Well, yeah, okay, so that would be very scary, let alone it being a clown. They didn't have the special effects that they have today. This was early 80s technology, and it was definitely not foolproof. Lastly, we have the death of co-star Will Sampson, who died in 1987, a year after shooting Poltergeist 2. He passed away due to complications after a lung and heart transplant surgery. This was a high-risk surgery due to his condition at the time, and this was not completely unexpected. Then lastly, we have Julian Beck, who played Casein, who's super scary. Like when I was a kid, his character used to freak me out.
You're gonna die in there! All of you!
He was diagnosed with stomach cancer in 1983, and he actually passed away during the filming of Poltergeist 2. This was a disease that he had been struggling with for years, so although he passed away a little bit sooner than expected, it wasn't a complete shock. When thinking of the Poltergeist films, you're already kind of vulnerable to the idea of the supernatural and ghosts and spirits, and so I think that people are able to make sense of these events in a way by attributing a curse to it. But to me, everyone dies, and each of these people really did have a rational explanation as to how and why. That's not to say I don't believe that there's potentially curses associated with other movies, but I am definitely a skeptic at heart, and if you really do research each of these occasions, there's a lot of stuff that kind of debunks this curse.
You know something? You're right.
Let me know in the comments if there's another horror movie you want me to talk about next, or maybe even another curse. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Pleasure visiting with you.